I want to welcome you to our award ceremony for The Eye of the Beholder, The Art of the Found Object. This exhibition is literally my favorite one whenever we do it. And I am so sorry that we are not able to gather in person, which obviously for future ones, we hope to be able to do. Because meeting the people that do assemblage art is really fun. I got into a conversation one time between an artist who had just gotten a whole bunch of watch parts and another who had gotten a whole box of army men, and they were figuring out a swap at the time. And people who create art out of stuff just truly see art in everything around them. They are extremely creative, extremely inspirational artists to work with. And we are so happy that we could do this exhibition every other year at Circle Gallery. I want to introduce Angela Petruccio, who is herself an assemblage artist. She is the force behind Eye of the Beholder. She is the one who brought the idea for this exhibition to our exhibition committee, and she's the person that makes this happen as a volunteer every other year. So Angela, with great thanks, I turn this over to you.
Well, thank you, Joanne, and it certainly is my pleasure always to chair this show since its inception back in 2010, and every year it seems to get better and better. And this show is just spectacular in my estimation. Before I introduce our juror, I'd like to express my sincere thanks for all the support for this show, that the many people whose hard work made it happen. Among them, David Diaz, Sharon Arsenault, Laura Carty, Martha Campbell, and Joanne Vaughn, and my husband, Emil Petruccio. Jim Condron is a mixed media painter and sculptor, and I'll just add that he has been using found objects extensively in his recent work. He studied at the New York Studio School and earned his MFA at the Hofburger School of Painting at the Maryland Institute College of Art, better known as MICA. Among his numerous awards and grants, he has won an individual support grant from the Adolf and Esther Gottlieb Foundation, a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant, and a Maryland State Arts Council Individual Artist Award. Solo exhibitions in recent years have been held at the Delaware Contemporary Museum, Wilson College, Loyola University, Harvard University's 3 Columns Gallery, and Yvette Torres Fine Art in Rockland, Maine. Jim teaches varied and intriguing art courses at MICA, including elements of visual thinking, and currently is artist in residence at the New York Studio School's Dumbo Sculpture Studio and Gallery in Brooklyn. Jim, we are delighted that you could be our juror for Eye of the Beholder, and with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be here and really flattered that MFA chose me to do this, this job, which has not been easy. Thank you, Angela and Joanne, Laura. Really, as you all know, choosing work is not fun. It's not fun to, also not to see the work in person. I know that's real obvious. I'll get into that when I talk about what I said in my statement. But I wanted to just address something, maybe obvious, maybe not, but the history of assemblage, right? If we look at it through the sort of Western canon, I can't help but do this because I teach a little art history. But the Western canon, of course, is being expanded. But let's go back and look at it from traditional terms. And if you've read this, you know that there's a sort of mythology that starts with Picasso in 1912, right? And that the myth that, or it's not a myth, it's a truth, of course, but an origin myth, I guess you would say, where he's working on this still life and he takes some oilcloth that has a sort of image, a realistic image of a cane, chair, and he sticks it onto the painting, and then he frames it. Rather than using the frame, he uses that rope, and voila, like we have the birth of assemblage, right, which then traces through Boccioni, Merritt Oppenheim, Kurt Schwitters, Duchamp, Joseph Cornell, now to the 50s Rauschenberg, well, Cornell's 50s Rauschenberg. We could include Thornton Dial, who's now part of the canon, and then we go to contemporary times and we look at Jim Dine, Harmony Hammond, Betty Saar, Ellen Atsui, Judy Pfaff, Jessica Stockholder. There's like any number of artists we could mention, right, in this sort of lineage. But of course, we know that assemblage is as old as time, right? It's a human sort of practice of transforming stuff, whether it's charcoal and spit or whatever the material is, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, with assemblage, we tend to think of it as non-art materials being being used in a sort of fine art way, right? If I boil it down, we are using materials, transforming materials into art somehow. And so I'm going to now turn, instead of talking more, I'm going to use William C. Seitz's quote from an exhibition catalog of a show that was done at MoMA in 1961 called The Art of Assemblage, right? So here we go. This is William C. Seitz. Every work of art is an incarnation, an investment of matter with spirit. The term assemblage has been singled out with this duality in mind to denote not only a specific technical procedure and form used in the literary and musical as well as the plastic arts, but also a complex of attitudes and ideas. So if we use that definition, of course, we can say that all art is a sort of assemblage, right, of ideas and of materials, right, and a transformation of those ideas and a combination or recombination. So yeah, we're looking at an assemblage themed show, but we could do this with painting, we could do this with photography, we could do this with any medium, I think. So give you that background, that history. As a juror, if you're, as a person, you have likes and dislikes, personal likes and dislikes, and you do your own thing, right? So I'm a painter and working with found objects. I started doing that in 2014, not that long ago. A friend of mine referred to myself and others as a sort of reformed painter. There's not a sculptor who comes over and looks at my work and says, oh yeah, you're a sculptor. It's always you're a painter working with objects. And that's true. That's how I see my own work. And probably to some extent how I look at other work. Now, you're never the artist that you wish you were, right? That's kind of also a truism for me. I like a lot of work that has nothing to do with my own. So what's fun about doing this and great about doing this is I get to see work that I don't make, that I don't understand. Yeah, so to the artist statement really quickly. Painfully obvious since we've been in COVID and since we're virtual all the time, that we're looking at squares on a screen, right? I mean, of course we know that when we're during a show and you're submitting your work to a juror online, you know that we are seeing images of images, right? We're seeing your interpretation or your photographer's interpretation of your work. That's a massively important thing to remember when you're looking at work this way, as we are right now, as we're going to be looking at the work right now. Why do I say that? Because of course, the lens, right, is a certain distance from the work. We're closer, we're far. The lighting matters, right? The background matters. All these things are obvious, but maybe not so much. So what did I notice across the board? A wonderful combination of materials, both and what's also cool about it is a kind of the level or the degree of different temperaments in this show. Fastidiousness, what would we call the opposite? A sort of rough-hewn assembling of things, right? Sometimes a self-conscious use of materials and sometimes a sort of fluid use of materials so that the material disappears into something else. That's fascinating because it's different with each person. Sometimes there's a focus on the materials for pure formal, purposes. And then sometimes the subject is real prevalent. And then the other thing I noted was an interest in narrative, right? Storytelling. Sometimes those stories were personal or felt personal, biographical, autobiographical. Sometimes they felt mythic. Sometimes they felt political. We are in interesting times. And well, interesting is like the most, vacuous word I can think of, but we know that we're in trying times. We're in painful times. We're in times that we don't understand. We can't wrap our heads around. How do you make art? during this time. Some of your pieces may have been made during this time, during COVID, in the past year and a half. Some of you, maybe these are older pieces, I don't know. So there's a lot I don't know, but what I do know and what I would note is that the things that I noted, the pieces that I noted that were exceptional, had a sort of thing that made me ask, what is this? How is this? Why is this? It made me ask questions, and it made me want to know more. And to me, that's excellent. That's like one of the best things, besides the work that you see, and it makes you want to make work. That to me is the test of all tests. When you look at something and you're really inspired to get to the studio and do your own work. So, and I did feel that. So yeah, so I hope that summarizes the kinds of things I'm thinking about, and you get a little sense of what the person looking at your work was thinking, yeah, as you reflect back on this. And I hope you get it. I'm going to try to get to this show to see it, because the 4 or so images I've seen are beautiful. It's a really beautifully hung show. And I'm really proud. I mean, I didn't even make the work, and I'm proud to be part of it. So, so it's super cool. I think that's what I've got to say. I want to look at the work together.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Let's start with the honorable mentions. So our first honorable mention goes to Natalie Ogilvie for Look at Me.
Natalie, I'm just looking at the notes that I took here. The first thing I noticed was this, when you look at the size of this image, it's not a big image, but it feels big. So you've played, I think, really effectively with scale, especially when you're looking at a sort of two-sided image, right? And then you've got the loadedness of what seems like the back of a head, right? There is a tradition of inward facing or away facing subjects, right? Which also makes you always wonder, why is that subject facing away from the viewer? And then you have these sort of childlike images in the second part, which begs the question for me, what is this about? Can you talk to us at all about the content, or do you want to? I would love to know.
So a lot of the back to me was a very internal, because the sculpted face is looking into that, and then as you turn it around, you have it's actually a magnified mirror there. So it's a very in-depth look, and to me, on a personal level, it was a very in-depth look of a childhood, and you have a little more of an adult back of the head, but a very childlike, deeper, not like a PTSD kind of thing, but a deeper meaning to the younger side of that, I guess.
Very cool. Can you tell the audience what the general size of it is?
So I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I want to say it's about 10 inches, 9. I know it's in the information I sent, but I think it's 9 by 9 roughly, and then maybe about 1.5 inches deep. So it's not all that big, but it does, like you said, it has that more scaled look from the point of view I took it from.
No, for sure. Okay, so why don't we leave it at that, and go on to the next, because we'll just do a sort of overview here and then come back.
The next honorable mention is Andrew Wall Network.
Great.
Hi.
Hey, there you are. Hey.
Hi, Jim.
Andrew, this is a big piece, yes?
Yes, it's about 5 feet high, 4 feet wide, and maybe 12 inches deep.
Right on, right on. So you have a heck of a time conveying that, right? And in one image or 2 images. Yeah.
Oh, did I surprise you?
No, not actually. You didn't, because I was very aware of the, I wanted to know what the measurements were, so I sort of looked at that, and then I also got the cheat sheet because I got to see the installation of the show.
Yeah.
So even without knowing, I found this piece fascinating, because I knew that it was wire, right, and yet it looks like a drawing. So this has the classic thing that I love, which is when something fools me into thinking it's something else, right? That's a fun thing. And then also something that appears at first so simple, that actually ends up being extremely complex. Something that could be almost flattened into a pattern that becomes super spatial.
Right.
So it has all these awesome paradoxes in it, including something that feels sort of dangerous, but also actually quite formal and beautiful at the same time. So you were running this kind of great formal paradoxical piece. that I tend to like, and I liked instantly, actually. So you're kind of right up my alley here on a personal level, but I think this is a very powerful piece. What's the title about?
It's sort of like a network. It could be crisscrossing roads. It happens to have these metal knots in them, which gives it a sense of nodes and matrix. I studied engineering. It reminds me of an electrical circuit with resistors and different components. I've had it hanging on my wall for years, and I'm somewhat ambivalent about getting rid or selling it. But I love it. It's my favorite piece when it's up on my wall.
That's pretty special and awesome when you love a piece of your own, and that you can live with it for that long, because we know when pieces are not good or are not satisfying in that way, right, to ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, so it's cool. So this hangs when it's in your house?
Right.
Okay.
At some point I might build a pedestal, a low, not a tall pedestal, but a low, long horizontal, and sort of secure it by the base instead of hanging it on the wall. But that's more work. I just want to mention real quick, I visited a warehouse. It's called Community Forklift. They sell, when they tear down classic buildings, they keep the radiators, doorknobs, fantastic doors and things. So I go there to find objects to photograph because I like doing still life also. And I saw this on the loading dock, and it was standing up like this, and the sun was behind it. And I said, I have to have that. They thought I was crazy. Anyway, I bent it up a little more, but yeah, I love this piece. And thank you for recognizing it.
Oh, yeah, it's a wonderful piece. So I have to ask you, as was mentioned earlier, and if we were like hanging out and looking at work together, we'd be asking each other, and I'd be asking you, so where is this place that you find these materials? Materials?
It's called Community Forklift. I think it's in Hyattsville, Maryland. Okay. It's a fantastic warehouse. Everybody here, if you want more found pieces to assemble things, to do assemblage, Community Forklift, it's wonderful. It's a real, candy store for finding great objects.
Yeah, you sort of hit on it perfectly, right? So I'll ask you quickly before I go on to the next person. You saw this in the sun, right? You saw it, and you're like, what was it that drew it to your attention?
I think, I don't know. Again, I'm an engineer. I like grids. I seem to like grids. I like line work. I like pencil work and precision. But it's not repetitive. It's random at the same time. I think I like the precision of it and the simplicity of it.
Yeah, same things I like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of has a fractal aspect to it.
Yeah.
Right. It seems to move too.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a lot of energy and a lot of precision, a lot of energy. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good. Really like it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, the next honorable mention goes to Mark Zaref for Enso, which is also the piece that's behind my head. So.
I thought I had seen that.
Yeah.
So Mark, first thing that strikes me, of course, is the elegance of the form. Yeah, like right off the bat, it has a beauty to it. Can't miss it. Of course, the calligraphic quality, or the graphic quality, and of course you've referenced it by the title, and you can talk about the title. I'd love for people to know in case they don't. But actually, would you describe the title and what that means, or what that is, what practice that is?
Yes, Enso is a generic term. It means circle, all-encompassing, and the Enso as a calligraphic form in Zen is it's almost a warm-up movement of ink on paper. So a monk, an artist, would begin his session of the day by this warm-up, where basically his whole mind and spirit exit through his body in one movement of this circular form. And never looking for perfection. In fact, the imperfection of ink drops and smudges and things that happen during the process are celebrated. And my schooling, as far as I'm an artist and designer, and I do draw every day, is I was in Japan and I was witnessing a monk doing this, and I was intrigued by it. And I then began to learn it, practice, and I was able to incorporate it into my sculpture once I had a command over the medium. And in this case, it's steel. And one would think, well, how is steel related to drawing? And well, that's a whole other thing. I do all types of drawings with steel. But the medium itself lends itself to me, and one can get into the frame of mind on each piece that's added. And what I always found interesting about Enso is the whimsy behind it, because when one sees the characters, usually in a contrasting red or different color calligraphy, written next to it on a scroll, everybody thinks it's such a profound statement. But oftentimes the monk is saying something like, "What is this?" or "I hope I have a good day," or imperfection, perfection. And therefore, you know, the objects, which I do, again, have a collection like most of us artists do of things, like the train tracks and different things that one would see in it, add to that whimsy and kind of carry it on beyond the original medium of ink on paper.
Brilliantly said. Actually, you nailed all my points. Whimsy was one of them. How you carry this sort of drawing form into what is a more, what would appear to be a more static form, you know, right, and what would be a much more labored process than, of course, the, you know, that act, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've answered all of that.
Yeah, well, it's that act multiplied by each piece, because again, getting yourself into that frame of mind and rejoining the stroke every time, just, again, it's exhausting. It brings you back into that moment of, well, this is something that is just free. It's just a form. And in the end, you hope that it ends up this way. And this just happens to be one of many that I have done. This one is actually, it's a matte black, so it has a very ink-like quality to it. It's almost as if you squint, you see how, like the dry brush, which is another aspect of an Enso, which is celebrated. There's a dryness of the brush, and then sometimes a heavier part of it when one is making it on rice paper. But I also do them with patinas and different types of finishes. But yeah, this one, and even the mount, you know, sometimes it's in museums and display, it's almost as if when one wants to make the mount go away and make the object precious, whether you're displaying a sword or vessel, you know, that is also kind of carried through in a more of a nondescript mount to let the circular form have its magic and keep turning.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's great. Mm-hmm. I think that was, as I say, you've answered all my questions. We can talk, as we say, we'll go further later, and people can ask more questions. But I think that's beautiful.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, next person.
Honorable mention is Malka Kutnick for crawling.
Okay, so this is so funny because, you know, I'm just giving you, I'm like totally shooting from the hip for all you guys, even though I've looked at the work a lot. The size here matters as well, and I see behind you. Now, can you give me the general dimensions of this piece?
Okay, approximately is 48 inches in length and 20 something in width. I wasn't prepared to say the dimensions, but it's about that.
Gives us a sense of a very large piece again, right? When you display this, is it a wall piece or is it a pedestal piece?
It's a wall piece.
That's what I thought. Okay, I found what I think was, well, first of all, can you tell us about the materials that you used that went into this?
Sure. Okay, there's denim, different colors of denim, and there's some upholstery material, and there's the yellow is actually from my cousin's yellow skirt, the belt from my cousin's yellow skirt. So all these materials we repurposed. I get the materials by asking my friends and family. Then I collect them. I sew them up in pleats to give them structure. And then I play with them on the floor like a puzzle. I turn them vertically, horizontally. I attach them in different ways. I use maybe safety pins to do it temporarily. So this one, I sewed up most of the pieces, but left some spaces in the panels, not knowing what I was going to do. I'm very process orientated. So it's not like I know in the beginning what it's going to be in the end. I'm working with it all along. So, and then the final result of this, I hang it up and then I look at it. And then, well, do I leave it just the denim? Maybe. I like the spaces, the wall shows behind it. That's fine. On the other hand, I felt the urge to make something crawl in through those spaces. And so I played with that until I reached this. Now I'm a painter. I am interested in dance and music. And so I started painting in oil and watercolor rhythms, different colors and rhythms. And it occurred to me that I could take the canvas and cut it up and sew it back together. And I put it on a frame, and then the back seemed more interesting than the front. So, and then I took it off the stretcher, and then I began to play with form and structure and different ways of viewing it. So sometimes there's back and front and inside, outside. It's a puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, spoke of that beautifully. So this crawling, is it just is that an expression of what you felt as you were putting this together, or is there a narrative going on here?
There were spaces. Sometimes I think of these as layers of rocks. I studied geology also, and so there's spaces and things happen in between those spaces. And so I envisioned, well, I played with it, and this is what I figured could happen in these spaces. And I didn't just do it once, I just played with it until I felt it was right.
Yeah, it's funny. I also thought of, if these were denim jeans, let's say, for example, like one could crawl in, physically crawl in jeans, and where do jeans wear out, but in the knees, and so you've got the workwear component of it. It's like, it's there's so many levels that you could sort of talk about this and think about this. I saw this instantly when I thought of this. I thought of climbing. So I thought the crawling, it made me think, wow, why not? Because it's vertical, right? And I knew it was a vertical thing. So, and yet I felt a climbing, which makes sense in terms of strata and, geology and moving through layers of things. And I thought that was fascinating. Actually, I didn't know that, but I must have been picking up on it, just looking.
And I'd like to mention that the sewing machine, the Singer industrial sewing machine that I use was given to me by my immigrant father decades ago.
Wow.
There's a connection there, but he used sewing machines to sew shoes.
Whoa.
And my mom used to sew. She used to work in a cloak factory making coats.
Oh, wow.
So actually, when girls were required to take sewing in junior high when I was going to school, and boys took woodshop, which I wish we both would have taken both. But actually, sewing was one of my worst subjects because I felt like the other, I don't know, it didn't get me. But later, when I really wanted to do something in art, I had a purpose And actually in my art, although I could make it I suppose, make it very static and straight, I find more beauty in the imperfections. And I leave all the threads hanging. I don't try to cover it up. It's very transparent.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you want us to know how this was made and what the origins were, right?
Right.
No, I think it's fascinating, the history, your own personal history being sewn in, right, to the product, and that's in your blood. It's very, very cool, and it makes it very personal, right? I like it very much.
Next honorable mention is Linda Pop. You're as beautiful as you feel.
Linda, I'm assuming that's a Carole King quote, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I couldn't help but hear it as I'm looking. These, I'm saying these, but I was actually thinking of, yeah, so the dimensions being asked here, roughly?
It's 4.5 by 3.5 by 3. It's a tiny little treasure. The vessel is actually a vintage woman's compact.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. Which makes it, that is another layer of meaning I hadn't thought about actually until you just said that. What strikes me first, let me just say quickly, is the elegant use of color. Like there's a really subtle and beautiful and slow acting, how would I say this? Connecting and combination of colors that I absolutely think is fascinating. And there's a sort of humor that's going on here, along with the nostalgia, of course, because at first we're thinking, oh, these are kind of, these are dated pieces, but they feel very contemporized and they feel sort of taken out of their own historical context, which I think is a great strength of the work and a surprise of the work. So this is a slow piece, I found. Yeah, can we show the back also? Because the back is important. Yes, Linda?
Yes, the back is an embroidery from, I think, like a scarf that went on a table or something. Yeah.
Do you have a story here that do you work from story or from narrative or from, autobiography, or are you working, some other way?
I always start with my intention, which is, I call myself a narrative found object assemblage artist. So the story is what drives the piece. It gives me the intention. And it usually starts off very personal, but then through the process, it becomes much more universal. I think this is a little series that I've worked on, thinking about female beauty. And I enjoy working on art, thinking of a woman's perspective, because of course, when I was in school, we never heard about any female artists. So, and it's, I've sort of taken that on as one of my tasks, is to be true to that female story. I'm also getting older, and we think about the lines and the wrinkles, and we look in the mirror and we try, put on the makeup and all that. And this is sort of to remind us not to focus on that outer beauty. In this case, to be in touch with that inner ballerina that's in all of us. And you're as beautiful as you feel. So attitude is so much of our beauty. And I enjoy going between larger works and these kind of small things. That challenge of working with different sizes. And of course, when you're using found objects, you're always working with different materials, and how do I get this to stand up and stay together and be archival and tell a story, and all of that is part of it, which I love that challenge. Yes,
all good. All very good. I don't want to take too much time, so you guys can, you can, sorry, I would talk all night, that's the fun thing about this.
Thank you.
but I'm glad because I think my read was pretty accurate, which is pretty exciting. And actually, I think, just sorry, quickly, it actually expresses that song fairly well because, you know, in a way that song has an optimism, right? But it also has a sort of sadness, like a real sadness underneath, right? So, and there is that in this, I think, you know, an optimism and yet a sort of acknowledgement of that, you know, core, no, we're not right yet. Right? If we were, we wouldn't be saying it. So yeah, no, it's great. Wonderful piece.
Thank you.
Okay, first year's choice goes to Jeff Bolander, After the Harvest, Lead Home.
Okay, Jeff, we know, I know, and people need to know, this is a very big piece, yes?
It's 60 inches by 48.
So yeah, very big, and it's a complex piece in that you're using all kinds of materials. Can you list them? Oh, it does list it here. Okay, so sorry. I thought this was interesting. You've got phototransfers, oil stick, cotton, tung oil, graphite, a hymnal book, studio rag, found metal. Okay, so it's of course making me think of, just I think because of the perspectival space, you know what I'm going to say, probably it has a Gerhard Richter reference, doesn't it? And if you've seen some of those massive Richters with, you know, the ships and those massive, like, you know, it's not quite as big as some of the Richters we've seen, but it has that sense of nostalgia. He's dealing with a different kind of history than I think you are, but I want to know, like, what I wanted to know from the start, what are these about? And I say these because I'm thinking of your other pieces as well, but can you tell us about, this is a part of a series, because I think the other one was also After the Harvest.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Gerhard Richter because I've never heard a comparison to his work and mine before.
Yeah, I can see it.
This is a little bit more of a obvious reference, I thought, to Anselm Kiefer.
I meant Kiefer. I'm sorry. You are correct. I meant Kiefer. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was wondering where the connection was with.
There is no connection. You are right. It is Kiefer. I'm sorry. I have Richter on the brain, but yes, you are correct. My bad.
Okay. The poem that's in it, the words and the title itself, comes from a poem called "Lead Home" by Paul Celan. Was a very huge influence on Kiefer. And so the series, I mean, it draws on some of my influences from other artists as well, but this was one that was a series of 4 pieces that I was really creating about fall, but I had started with an image of a grain, one of the large modern grain bins with all the elevators and things like that. You can see it just a little bit barely on the horizon at the bottom right there next to the rooster, but the weather vane. In the other ones, it shows up a little bit more, and even in the very first one, it shows up in 2 places. And you know, that's a reference, a personal reference to, I've been, even before this series and before the show that this was in, because it was first shown in a solo show that I had, Noma Gallery in Frederick, Maryland. And that show was called Topics of Discourse. And a lot of my work kind of ties into poetry. I had started reading some of Paul Celan's work, poems, his writings, from being interested in Kiefer. This is the one of the 4 that's a little bit more Kiefer-esque, I guess. Some of the other ones aren't quite as literal, although I think in one of them, actually I know in one of them has Paul Celan's name and actually some of his Kiefer's biography information in the words. So but the grain storage bin is more of a reference from my personal history and my parents and my heritage. My parents, Bolander obviously being a German name, and Kiefer and Paul Celan being German poets post-war. And my family's from, both my parents' families are from Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and very rural area. at least when I was growing up and visiting there. But my father's father, who I never met, he owned a mill called the Bolander Mill. And I guess even his father must have owned it, because it's been there since, or what had been there since 1848. And I was kind of making a comparison to some of the earlier work that I've done before this series. I've used actual images of that mill. And so just the modern technology versus the old technology, I'm often using images that will evoke an emotion, sort of references a shared visual language that we all have. So I don't want to be too specific in my work. I don't want to be too literal, so that others can bring their own story to it as well. So that's the history of the series, but it's also a little background of, my own work as well. We're trying to get, trying to tell a story, but also create an emotional connection with the viewer as well, and show these complex associations that objects themselves and shapes and forms can create.
Brilliant. Yeah, again, you touched on everything. Sorry with that gaffe, I'm embarrassed. Wow. Kiefer was who I was thinking of, by the way, like from the start. Oh, geez, I was going to tell you well, I should tell you on the side, because we're going to have tons of time. But I like what you said, and what has been said actually before a couple times tonight, or this afternoon. That is, we want the personal narrative to be told, but we also don't want to be too personal, so that we can it becomes an opportunity for us to engage at our own levels and our own story. We bring our own stories to it, and that's very important, and it's clear in this piece. And by the way, the engagement with art history is fascinating too, like both contemporary and otherwise. So that's also, I think, powerful in this piece and strong.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Great. Our next juror's choice goes to Jason Lyons for Brook Trout.
Yeah, man, I loved this piece, and it's not at all what I do, but I think it's so beautiful in terms of its craft, and I think it was. I love. This is so funny. I love the type keys. I think it's so well integrated, and it's so beautifully made. Colors so subtle. And it's a fish, it's a fish, it's a trout, it's a particular trout, and it is gorgeous. I think that's what's great. That's honestly what my reaction was. I was just like, this is fascinatingly beautiful. And it also slowly unfolds, because that's not really apparent right away. And it's a slow piece. Again, it's a piece I really enjoy looking at. And I'm looking at an image of it, which, by the way, is also an excellent image. Since we were pointing out actually everything that's we've looked at tonight have been carefully photographed and beautifully presented. So yeah, I want to know, well, actually the first thing I wanted to know is why a brook trout? Like, how do you choose your subjects?
Well, honestly, it varies just on the materials themselves. Generally where I'll start, I do a lot of fish. It's one that I keep going back to. I've just always been drawn to it. I like the initial shape. I like knowing how many different directions you could actually take it in, because every one I've done is very different, and granted, that's driven by the materials themselves or just a style that I want to try to, convey in it, and get across of how, either I do put in the subtle colors, or it's strictly just a black and silver piece, that just really is crisp and pops, or to the point of just color. I mean, all kinds of weird color, all kinds of different materials that really work to convey the anatomy of the fish. So,
are you a fisherman?
I am. Probably not as much as you would think, but I am. So,
I would think you'd have to know the anatomy pretty well to do what you do. There's nothing, what I'm saying here is sorry to interrupt, but there's nothing like inherently fish-like in the materials that you're choosing, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I strive to do, and what really kind of drives me with my work, is to look at these objects, the materials, be it, the saw handles for the fins, for the dorsal fins, or you know, the shoe forms for the head, but you can look at that and go, oh my gosh, this is a fish head, you know, so, or this is a fish fin. And that is what always excites me about him, is being able to not really have to manipulate the parts too much. And then, you know, y'all as the viewers to go, yes, it's a fish, as she had said. I mean, it's simply put as that, but that's what I love to hear, because when it's said and done, that's what I want the viewer to see, is like, it's a fish. You don't point out the pieces right off, but then you come back, as again, you know, express that, then you start seeing the little bits and pieces through it. So I want the seamless design, you know, originally, and to come across that way. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say.
Success. Totally successful. And I think it's so fun to look at this piece, right? And to look at any of the other pieces. It is completely different, right? It is, you are actually trying to make your subject apparent, and yet you're trying to make the materials disappear. Whereas a lot of us, and others of us, are making the materials evident first, and then the image sort of comes in, right? So different goals here.
Definitely.
I would actually say in both cases, though, we're getting a transference. We're getting a changing, right, happening. And that's what's incredible to me and fun to look at. So yeah, very nice. And your sense of color is very subtle and beautiful. I think it's
Thank you. Well, that's another thing I try to do is, and it's almost in a way, it's funny, a lot of these pieces, it's almost like kind of serendipity or whatever, when I'll find certain parts and pieces and all the colors work. And I arrange it to where it pulls you through the piece at the same time too. Again, part of it, my big thing is to make it seamless, you know, and that's in every one. I try to convey that, you know, and so I'm very conscious about what and where the colors go in them, you know, so, and for what materials I'm using, you know, so.
No, it's very clear. It's very clear. It comes across.
Jason, we have a question. Did you specifically choose the letters and the symbols?
Great
no, no. And I have to be very careful about that, because I've spelled out some things in the past that.
That's funny.
I love that question. Yeah, it's great.
Juror's choice to Susan Mortar for Death's Head Moth, which is also right here behind me.
Oh, nice to see.
Right there.
I have to come see this show. It's like, I have to see this. It's too cool.
It's so fun.
Yeah, especially since we're talking about the work now, and I'm hearing what you guys have to say.
So can you unmute?
I'm sorry.
Here we go.
It's going to be tough for me anyway, because I have laryngitis.
Oh no, okay, I won't make you talk too much then.
That's okay.
So, although I have questions, of course.
Go ahead. Well, I'll try my best.
Okay.
Squeaky.
So my first impression was like, wow, that is sharp. You know what I mean? Like, that is a dangerous piece. Yeah, danger, that the scissors are instantly like, oh my God, and they're facing, you know, in toward.
They're piercing forceps.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, which makes it even more intimidating and cringeworthy for me. But I think, again, beautiful, subtle use of color. Gorgeous, by the way, photograph in terms of the light and the way you are using light and shadow, as you know, because we know that the piece, we're seeing it you know, virtually, you know, on the camera, but we're also seeing a still image of it. And, you know, you can see that you thought about light, right? And you're thinking about, what would I call that? A sort of like lightness, and almost like a featherweight quality, right? And yet you've also got a heaviness. These materials are heavy. This has to be a heavy piece, I would think.
Everything's heavy.
Right? Fascinating. So it's like, wow, talk about converting materials into something other than what we would expect. Just amazing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's funny that you talk about lighting, because a lot of my sculptures are lamps, and I use light as a whole other element. And I just love casting shadows and, you know, just the light patterns through some of these like punched metal, you know, plates and stuff. It's just beautiful. I sound like a pubescent boy right now.
Are you? No, So are you a sculptor? Are you a trained sculptor or are you a painter?
I actually went to school for illustration.
Or illustration, okay. That's
yeah, well, I always kind of gravitated towards 3 dimensions. Like I did soft sculpture in college and actually was in a bunch of galleries during college.
Wow.
And then I went off into a glass blowing stage for a while. And then right out of school, it was advertising and then I tattooing. And I've always ended up in these art careers that are very stressful. And I've just never really felt completely comfortable. And how you mentioned earlier about, you know, how nice it was for the artist to love their work. It's the first time I've actually loved to be around my artwork and not pick it apart, you know, and drive myself nuts. You know?
Yes.
But I really enjoy it, you know. I finally found my thing. And it was funny because when I started, I didn't even know the assemblage art was a thing. Like I had no idea. A friend just gave me a skull and I started painting it. And then, you know, how the sculpture just comes out in you and you know, then I started framing things and then I just got more into the combining, you know, of the skulls. And I love looking at things differently. So I love turning the skulls around and using pieces of them and, you know, just turning them into completely different, you know, creatures, you know, it's a lot of fun. And it's a lot like they were talking before about the puzzle making, you know, it's a puzzle. You know, it's a big puzzle.
Yeah, yeah. Was this I'm just curious, did this happen easily, this piece, or was this like, did you have failures in this piece?
I always have failures. You know, I don't know if you can see my studio, but every time I do a piece, it's, there's so much fitting pieces and they don't work and tearing things apart and redoing them. But this piece actually I had, and I'm sure everybody can relate that I'm a hoarder, you know, and I can't throw things out. The piercing forceps were actually, I'd had them forever from a tattoo artist that I had working at my shop. And I just couldn't sell them or get rid of them. And, you know, everything turns into art around here. There's no trash.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah.
I can't see your studio because I don't think or at least I can't see your video.
There's just, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You know?
I can relate.
Yeah. I think it's important to see everything. You know, when you're working on a piece, it's very hard for me when things are, it's very hard to, you know, have things like buried under things because I have to kind of see them, you know, and be inspired. You know, that's where the inspiration comes from too. You know, yeah. Oh my God, you poor people having to listen to me. This is terrible.
You're fine, actually. I wouldn't have known. Yeah, anyway. That's great. Now I'm seeing the studio behind now.
Yeah, it's my skulls.
Wow.
Yeah. But I just, it's just packed down here with bins of junk. I do the junkyards and the flea markets. Right. Life is a treasure hunt, you know.
Right on. No.
And everything I see though now, like I'm always trying to figure out what body part it is or where the skull will fit in. Yes. I can't help it now. It's everything.
I totally get it. No, it's great.
It's fun. It's so much fun though, because you know, I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to can relate where, you know, you can go into a store and see something as stupid as a little napkin ring or something, and it just throws you into this whole creative energy and excitement. You know, it's just wonderful.
That is what we probably all share.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are at a little after 5. What do you guys want to do?
I think if we want to spend 10 or 15 minutes or so with people commenting, that's fine. We can, like I said, that Sue kind of summed it up. When you're always worried about what body part it is or where the skull fits, how is this not the most fun discussion that we have all year? So, so I think if anybody else has any questions.
The worst part was I actually had a dream that I thought I was watching a music video, and it was beautiful, but all these dancers had big skull heads on, and I thought it was a real video, but I think it was a dream. So I'm even dreaming it, which is crazy.
We did have a question about, Sue, we had a question about what kind of animals skulls these are.
I use everything. Well, on that particular piece, it's a beaver and a, I believe the body is a deer skull. I'd have to look real close at it again. It's turned upside down. It might be a coyote. I'd have to look at it again. I use pretty much everything except for monkey skulls and no human skulls. It's all animal. But I've used ostrich. Like these are some bats I made with, I don't know if they can see, but it's an ostrich skull and a cat skull. It looks just like a bat. But I get all sorts of things. Giraffe, zebra, horses, hedgehogs, turtles. It's always fun.
Amazing.
Well, does anybody have any other questions for Jim or any comments on any of the other work or the pieces that are here?
This is Emil Petroncio. I had to Jim's point about bringing your own perspective or interpretation to the pieces. For Mark, when I helped unwrap the show and when we came across your ENSO, I got all excited because as an oceanographer, ENSO is an acronym for El Nino Southern Oscillation, this periodic warming of the Eastern Pacific. So I'm jumping up to Angela. Look at this dynamic ocean feature here, this ocean wave. It's great, awesome. But I also did pick up on the spirituality of the piece, and so it's just one of my favorite works in the show.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Any other comments? It really is. I mean, you know, I say this with every exhibition that we have, that you really need to come down and see it. But obviously these pieces, you know, translate the worst into digital photography. What I would say is obviously a digital photograph is its own medium. And so these 3D pieces you really do need to see in person.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, it's great. Jim, do you have any other comments that you want to make?
No, I just want to thank everybody for submitting such great work and for talking so eloquently about it. That's, you know, a massive part of it, helping us understand even further. That's awesome. I just, you know, I can't wait to see the work. Yeah.
It's great. It's great. And you touched on, the show has a lot of, there's a lot of serious weight behind a lot of the pieces, which we heard today. There's also a lot of whimsy behind a lot of the pieces. And so it's fun to get the backstory, but it's also fun to have people come in the gallery and look at it and provide their own interpretations as to what your artwork means to them. So on behalf of MFA, I want to thank all the artists for sharing your artwork with us. I want to thank Jim for picking an absolutely fabulous show. I want to thank Angela for putting this together. Without her excitement about assemblage art, I'm not sure that we would have ever gone down this road. And it's been, I think we've now been doing this show every other year for probably 12 years. So, so it's been wonderful to have you all on today. And if you're in the area, please stop in the gallery and look at the work.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.